All right, everybody, welcome back. So for those of you who have been to multiple app builders, we have a little bit of a tradition, and that is that we have my good friend Scotty, who is going to do some interviews with some really cool people where we get to hear a little bit more of their story behind the work that they're doing and how they got to where they are. So this interview is going to be with Vincent here, who is an engineering manager or engineering director of engineering at SoundCloud. But of course, he wasn't always that. Once upon a time, he was a developer just like you and me. And now we're going to hear the story about what happened to you. What happened to you to become an engineering manager. So let's go. Let's enjoy this interview. And yeah, let's take it off. Scotty and Vincent.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
So, Vincent, we met for the first time just before the conference started this morning.
Yes.
So I think it's only fair if you're going to sit there and be interrogated. Sorry, did I say questioned gently and with empathy by myself, that you first of all know a little bit about me. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to. This is for your benefit. You can talk amongst yourselves for a moment. So I've been to app builders for 4 years now, and for the last, as John just said, for the last 3 years, I've got to do these interviews with really cool people. So the first thing is you should be very pleased that you now count as a cool person.
Yes.
So you are now on that list. And it basically means that I get to sit in this chair. Well, I don't know if it's exactly this chair, but a chair similar to this one every single year. And all I do is ask a couple of questions that actually are provided by people out here.
Okay.
So my only skill set I need to do this job is to be able to read. And last year I forgot my glasses. But other than that. Okay, and in return for that, every year I get to come to a beautiful part of Switzerland.
It is.
Meet some really cool people, eat some great food, enjoy the sunshine. And that makes me very happy. So I guess whether I'll get to do this again will depend on you today. So I just want you to know that my future happiness and ability to visit Switzerland, eat cool food, and meet great people is in your hands.
I got you.
So no pressure.
No pressure.
That's it. Okay. So that's me. That's all you need to know, is I want to return to Switzerland, eat great food, and meet cool people. And outside of that, I am unimportant. So now people, you know who I am. So let's just start with John gave us a little bit of the overview there. Mm-hmm. But let's start with the sort of the 2 to 3 minute bio of Vincent.
Sounds good. Thanks, Scotty. We already have something in common, actually, because I also do want to come back here. Switzerland is really nice. You've seen like the nice views of the lake and the mountains. I'm really happy to be here today. Actually.
Well, we've been going on that long already. Well, thank you very much for coming.
Yeah.
Sorry you missed lunch.
Speaker's dinner was last night, so you have to forgive some things. So yeah, a little bit about me. My name is Vincent, and as John mentioned, I'm a director of engineering at SoundCloud, and I now work on the media streaming side of our business. But I started almost 7 years ago there as an iOS developer. And I learned a few things along the way, and I hope to share some tips and tricks with you today.
Okay, so it's it sounds like a big journey from individual contributor to grand title director of everything important type of thing along the way. So just pick out for us, if you had to. Just so that we can understand a little bit more about you, can you pick out a few points on that journey for us to show us the journey from one place to another? And then maybe after that we can dig into some of the things that we're struggling in that or good in that or whatever as we go. Absolutely.
So, before I joined SoundCloud, I had been doing iOS for a bit of time, not that long, because I joined there in 2011, and we started being able to make apps for iOS just a bit before that. And so I had done some of this at university. And so I joined SoundCloud and met some great mentors there that helped me along the way. And it took me to taking my first big step was becoming tech lead for iOS. So being responsible for the architecture and the engineering of all the iOS applications at SoundCloud. Did that for a few years, and that's when I started to dip my toes into engineering management, and ultimately got this fancy title of Director of Engineering, which I can tell a bit more about that and how that came to be later. So it was really these steps from being an individual contributor, working on an app with a team, and then leading that team and like really thinking about how to make the app work for all of these developers, up to leading people now.
Okay, so I mean, for many of us and many people maybe in this room, it seems it's a natural first step is to go from being an engineer on a team to being one of the leaders of the team.
Yeah.
What did you suddenly realize you didn't know when you made that first transition? Or let me rephrase that. Okay, if you were making that transition again today, what would have been the thing you wished most you had known about what the difference is between being a lead and being a contributor on a team?
Yeah, I think like the thing that surprised me most is that with this like slight title change, like from one day to the next, like you're not just a member of the team anymore. And that was really hard for me because like being friendly with my colleagues, and of course like you want to have good relationships with everyone. But when you get into that position, like you can't be friends with everyone and try to please everybody. And so the thing that's the most difficult that I found at first was being able like to make these tough decisions, saying no to people, and explaining why like we're going in a certain way, not another, not necessarily because something that someone suggested is wrong, but it's just like not the right fit for the team at that point. And that was really like the hardest part, like being able and learning how to say no to people and explaining why.
Cool. Just out of interest, so we can get an idea of who we're here. How many people here work on a team that is more than them? Okay, so that's maybe about a third. How many people work on their own? Okay, so the other people don't work. I think is what we could. How many people here are team leads? We have more team leads than workers. Unless those were the people who work on their own, of course, and they count themselves as team lead, which could be in there. I'm not sure we've made any conclusions from that of who we're actually talking to. So many people didn't put their hands up. What am I missing? Someone help me out here.
I think people didn't quite get what you said first.
How many people work here? Shall I say it in exactly the same way? As if if it doesn't work first time, you just say it again in the same way. All right. We'll go through those questions again. Now you've had a chance to think about it. Okay. The camera's pointing this way. No one's going to see you. Okay. So, wait a minute. We'll turn that one off in a minute. Okay. How many people here work on a team that is multiple people? Oh, there we are. Yeah. See, they're all reliant on someone else listening in the team meeting. And they didn't have to answer the question first time round. Okay. Great. So people understand what it's like to work on the team and have different areas. Yeah. Okay, so how long were you a team lead for before you...
I think like 2.5, 3 years, something like that. I was like kind of acting as the team lead for a little bit before I became the actual team lead.
All right.
So it's always a bit like that, like the transitions, they're never... I mean, sometimes they are like from one day to the next, you become, like you step into this new role. But I think that like on a team, like someone usually naturally emerges as the leader. And it's actually I find it pretty bad when a team has no leads, for instance, because someone has to make some decisions, or at least like this is where the buck stops. And at some point, we can't keep having this old argument over and over again. Someone has to make a decision and make a call. It's important for that role to be filled by someone on the team or the manager. It depends on your setup.
So when you became team lead, firstly, how did your team take it? We won't let any of your team see it, or your old team see it.
They might be watching.
Okay.
I think that's... So like,
the director's out the office. They've all taken a day off. And,
But I have to tell you a bit more about the circumstances to explain that, because so like the role that I took, like becoming the platform lead for iOS, or tech lead for iOS, as it used to be called back then, it didn't exist before. And the team wasn't doing very well when I stepped into that role. So if I rewind a few months, we used to be this one team, and I think we grew to like 5 or 7 people, and we hired a few more people, And it didn't quite work anymore as this one team, and so we got split into a bunch of different feature teams, which I think is quite common in companies. But what we lacked back then was kind of a role where like someone would gather like feedback from all the different iOS developers in all the different teams and figure out like where do we want to go together. And we didn't have that. And so for like a few months, we were kind of all going in our separate directions. There were a lot of frustrations that built up. A lot of people left as a result. And so that's where like I saw an opportunity for this role to be there. And I made a big mistake back then, which was to I talked to a bunch of people saying like, hey, I think we need a tech lead for iOS and we need a tech lead for Android because we have all of these problems. I talked to my boss about it, talked to my boss's boss about it. And at some point, and I talked to a bunch of other senior engineers in the company, and at some point, I got the sign-off from my boss's boss saying like, yeah, okay, if you can convince the team that it's a good idea, then like, you should go for it. And so I set up a meeting with the team, and I told them like, hey, I think I have a solution for the problems that we have. The solution would be that I become the tech lead for iOS and like help us work together. And I got the sign-off from the bosses about it. Let me tell you that like, they were not happy about this. And yeah, if you meet like an iOS developer from SoundCloud who was there roughly in 2015, you can ask them about this period, and it wasn't fun. Because basically like they felt betrayed, that I had gone behind their back, talked to the bosses first and not them first about it. But it was also like my first lesson that like, yeah, you can't please like everybody all the time. And sometimes you have to make a tough decision and follow through with it. And eventually, like the relationships improved and we figured out a way to work together and move forward.
So when we had the question, how did you differ from other devs back in your team back then? Did you just happen to be in the right place at the right time? But I think you're saying you took some initiative. And would you encourage that in your own developers now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that, so you take initiative, but like, I think what happened back then is that, the team was very close-knit before it got split into feature teams. And there was a bit of like us against them mentality. So like, the bosses are splitting us up. We don't really understand why. Like, it was much better before. Why can't we go back before? And it kept going on and on again. And I think that when you start trying to understand, like, okay, what is the company trying to do? What are we trying to achieve here by making this move? You realize that, like, yeah, everybody's trying to do the best job that they can. And if you have the opportunity to be successful in your own company, it's usually by understanding how other teams work and what they expect from you. And basically, like, when I came to the bosses with a solution for the problem that they were having, like, they're super happy because suddenly it's a load off their mind and they know that like, okay, I can give this task to Vincent and it's going to make it happen. That helps a lot. Okay, so let's stay in that period just for the moment.
And but you've now got a number of years of management experience on, in different levels on top of there. But let's go back to that situation where you are a developer on a team. You can see the issues in there. You can see what needs being solved. How would you do it? You said your team, what became your team, didn't like it. So if you were back there, if you were Vincent going back in time now and sat there, what would you do if you were there today and differently?
I think I would use a few of the tools that I've learned since. So I think you can have a retrospective with the team about like how we work and try to basically figure out together what are the issues and what we could do about solving them. And I think that had we done this back then, we would have found like probably the similar issues that I had detected, but more importantly, we would have found like the ones that I didn't see before. And I think that something that I missed really was the tension between the people on the team and like the N+1, and not your boss, but like your boss's boss. And I think that what I failed to do back then was really to like explain to people why why did the company split the teams up and what we were trying to do.
Just going to do a check. I noticed your microphone has moved. Can people hear at the back?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's not your fault. Okay, we'll get it fixed.
Oh, right.
Or you can just stick it back on his ears, or... Oh.
Okay, yeah, I can use that.
Okay, we'll carry on. Well, you can have a man... I was about to use words that would have been very inappropriate. Doing things. Is that very distracting for you?
No.
No, okay. Another thing of management, just learn to ignore everything that's going on around you. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you became team lead. You learned some lessons about becoming team lead. What was probably the biggest thing that you learned as a team lead? Once you've made that transition, you were into the job. Yeah. What would you say was the biggest thing you learned or gained, or something?
So, yeah, one thing to note though is like when I became tech lead, I wasn't managing anybody directly. So I was like, my responsibility was, first of all, like not very clearly defined, which you don't want to be in that position because then you end up doing way too many things. But like essentially it boiled down to, okay, I need to make sure that like everybody that's contributing to the iOS apps at SoundCloud stays productive and figure out like what the problems are and try and fix them. But like when you don't have anybody reporting to you, like all of this, like making things happen, it all goes through like relationships in the company. And yeah, that was hard because it takes a lot of effort like to keep up to date on everything that's going on. And especially in a company that's growing up and where all the processes aren't clearly defined, like you have to take a lot of initiatives and do a lot of things on your own, kind of like do it now and ask for forgiveness later type of thing, which can get tough. And I'm rambling and I'm forgetting the question, and it's something that you also get to learn at some point, that it's important to keep going so that you can think. And and then like you have to manage all of these relationships, and you have to know like which meetings to get to so that you can anticipate the problems that are going to happen. And I think that was the thing that I did like best, was like going to these like product meetings that you don't necessarily want to go to because everybody's talking about what's going to happen in 3 years and like not really what's about to happen next week. But you need to understand that, yeah, like that screen in the SoundCloud app, it's called the stream. You might not know about it, but I can tell you that like it has not changed in the last 3 years. And like I knew that. I knew it was never going to change because we're focusing on other parts of the application. And so whenever someone said like, yeah, I hate that code, like we have to do something about the stream, and I could tell them like, no, we don't have to do anything about the stream. Like we should focus on these parts that are more important because I know that we're going to need this when we build that feature in 2 quarters. And that was like really key to being successful as a tech lead, is like being able to anticipate the hotspots in the code.
So just to make sure I understand your position here, so as tech lead, you didn't actually directly manage the developers as people.
No.
There was people above you making the product decisions, and so basically your job was to try and influence that, but to listen to that and then get the developers to do architecture and stuff around that. Yeah. Whereas actually not being responsible for them. Yeah. And that sounds quite a tricky job, to be honest.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to convince the product owners that, yeah, we can build that feature in a couple of months, but what if we built it in 3 months? Which, like, usually, like, no one's going to go for, because, like, it has to be out as soon as it's ready. We oftentimes, like, have to take shortcuts, but, like, I was able to, like, a couple of times convince like a product owner that no, like we should take more time to refactor this component because it's going to be useful to you in the future when you want to build that next feature. And so like really being able to translate the technical issues that you're having into like product issues and being able to sell like the refactorings. And I think it's really key that like I love programming and I actually really miss it now in my new position. But like if you want to be able to work on the cool stuff that that you want to do, like, you need to be able to express to people who don't understand code why this is important. And yeah, it's something that you just like cannot ignore in any organization, because if you do ignore it, like, you're never going to get to work on the things that are really important to you. And when you can translate a technical issue to someone on the product team or someone on the marketing team or business team, like, two things can happen. Like, on the one hand, you're able to make a really good case for it, and then you get to do the refactoring that you want to do. Or you're not able to make a good case for it, which probably means that you shouldn't do that. And you should instead focus on something else that's more important to the company. Because I work in a VC-backed company, and so we don't have, like, we have to go fast, and we don't have the luxury of working on everything. So, yeah, like, kind of the first priority is doing the right thing so that you have a job next month.
We've got a bunch of questions coming in. I'm going to try and ask, just so people know, I'm going to try and ask them where they fit within where we are. So hopefully I might combine some at a time, but please do keep them coming in. So because we're still at tech level and about designing it, were you using any sort of methodologies in the company at that point? Were you using Scrum or Agile of some form, or were you making it up as you went along? Or?
I mean, like we say, we're agile. Like, I think we're pretty agile, but I'm not an expert. I think specifically at SoundCloud, like, every team can kind of organize themselves however they want to do things. It looks like Scrum. We have sprints that last 2 weeks, retrospectives, that kind of stuff. But no, like, we're not dogmatic about it.
So you're agile about your agile?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. During this time when you were sort of like now becoming this interface between tech and product, were you getting any training? Were you getting any personal development? Or was this like you were just flying by the seat of your pants, as we would say?
So there was a bit of winging it, of course. But like, really, like, what helped me most is that pretty much at every single point in my career, like, I had this person in the company that was mentoring me. Most times it was my boss, and had excellent ones. Like, when I became tech lead, my boss was Stacia Carr, and she was amazing and gave me like a ton of tools, like, to help me get better at my job. And this just like kept going. Like, when you become kind of a people manager, yeah, people are on code, of course, and so managing relationships is really hard, and there are like a lot of tools that you can learn to help with that. It's things like everybody communicates very differently, and so if you want to be most effective, you have to adapt your communication style to the person that you're talking to, and recognizing on your team which type of communication works best with people is super useful, because you want to be most effective at your job, but you also like don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And if you adopt like the same communication style all the time, this will happen. And so there's a whole range of skills that you have to learn once you deal with people a lot more. And so, yeah, I got great mentorship from my bosses, as well as an intro program at SoundCloud to coach new managers, and I took part of that. But also one thing though, like that program at the beginning, it was only for people manager, not tech leads. And so I was like, yeah, I think tech leads should also do that, because even though we don't have direct reports, like we do a lot of interacting with people. And so I asked my manager if I could get part of that.
So since you're pattern here, that you saw something and you asked for it, there's a lesson to be learned there, that sometimes if things aren't being offered, just go ask. Yeah,
absolutely.
I guess that will depend on the culture, but yeah. So in a team that's divided, go ahead, take some water. In a team that's divided by features and has a tech lead who doesn't directly manage them and is in a different product, how do you deal with disputes?
How do I deal with disputes? At first, badly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like most of us, then.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember a few cases where like I ended up having like really long conversations in the open plan office with someone on the team, with like a lot of people around hearing the discussion that just like didn't get anywhere. And that's one of these experiences that taught me how to use the, like what I call the tech lead card, where at some point just like, yeah, like the decision lies with me and it's not gonna happen. And that's the end of the discussion. So you can't play that too often, of course, because you don't want to be this dictator, like telling people what to do. But oftentimes, like that's how I resolve disputes. Sometimes we experimented with a few different approaches before finding the right one. Yeah, like there's so many tools that you can use, like to actually like resolve these. We did an offsite sometimes, just take a couple of days, try something out, get feedback, that type of stuff.
So how long were you team lead before you moved on to what was next?
Almost 3 years.
3 years. And then what did come next?
What come next is, so yeah, I had been a tech lead for iOS for a long time. I had been doing iOS development for like 7 years. And I wanted to learn something new, like do more things. So I started getting involved with backend development. And so in my role, it was working on, we have a specific API for the mobile apps at SoundCloud, so I got involved with that. Still retaining the role of mobile tech lead, but like starting to learn new things. And then the big event of 2017 happened at SoundCloud. So if you're not aware, we were not doing so well, and we laid off 40% of the company in 2017. And what that translated for me was I had a team of over 20 iOS developers working on the app, and they were in I think 6 or 7 different teams. And from one day to the next, I ended up with like 10 iOS developers in 2 teams or 3 teams in Berlin. And so it was really hard for the company. And like when you look at your career, like suddenly the problems that I would have to solve are things that I had done already before. And I knew that it would take a really long time until the team would get as big as it was before, and then it would start getting interesting again. And again, I talked to my boss about it. And like it had changed at that point, and I told him that I was interested in doing more back-end development. Maybe as an individual contributor or as maybe an engineering manager, something like that. And basically, like in the month after, we just like kept an eye on the open positions in the company. And a position opened, and I applied for it.
So you went to being tech at that point, or management, or team lead somewhere else?
So yeah, I went from being a tech lead to a director of engineering, which is kind of an accident because it's because of the level system that we have at SoundCloud. So like you climb an engineering ladder, and there are like requirements for every level. And so I went from like level 1 when I was hired, which is like the lowest one, to like 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 4th level for the management track is called Director of Engineering.
Okay, so what does a Director of Engineering do?
Essentially, like it's someone who manages other managers, which is kind of like the easiest way to define it. But then there's also, like on the management side, I see it more as like how much work can you take off of your boss's shoulders?
Okay, so let me make sure I get this straight.
Yeah.
You went from managing nobody to managing people who manage.
So, okay,
I like the fact you missed the middle step out.
Not quite. So, like, picture this: like, I was the tech lead for iOS, so I didn't have like direct lines to the 24 people on the team, but I had dotted lines with all of them. So you have to maintain like this personal relationship, and because I had been at SoundCloud for a long time, I had like a lot of like career conversations with people, of like, oh, what should I do next, that type of things. And I was also interacting very closely with all of the managers. And that role, it was kind of a stepping stone into a directorship because I was managing one manager and then a team directly. So I had like, I think 5 direct reports, 4 engineers and 1 manager who was managing like a smaller team.
Okay. So what was the biggest shock when you took that position? What did you suddenly sit there and think, oh my word, what have I done? I don't know how to do this bit.
Yeah, it's like how many meetings like suddenly appear on your calendar out of thin air. And I thought I knew like what was happening to my boss, but actually I didn't realize that. And it's I gotten pretty good at context switching, but I got even better at that when I stepped into that position. It's just like how many things you have to keep in your head at any given time to be able to anticipate what's going to happen, like just in the next week or in the next couple of weeks.
I had an engineering manager once who would send the team an email every day saying, I defended you from 7 meetings today. And we'd all say, just send an email back saying, thank you. Yeah. It's a quick way to appreciate the manager when he tells you how many meetings he went to or she went to so that you didn't have to.
Yeah, but this is super hard, like finding this sweet spot between, you want to get people involved because otherwise, at some point at stand-up or if you're going to send emails saying like, hey, we're going to work on this next. And then everybody gets upset because they were not included in the decision-making or like how we came to that process. And yeah, you can't always include everybody in the decision-making because otherwise we wouldn't do anything. But you have to kind of like slowly let information filter from the meetings that you've been into and try to figure out like, okay, that project, like people have been talking about it a lot, but you kind of feel that it's never going to happen. So you like don't say anything about that. But there is something that might happen, and then slowly like you start evangelizing it with the team and getting feedback on that project. And that's it's a fine line to walk.
So, as an engineering director, you manage managers of engineers. How do you make sure you stay on top of? I mean, you're no longer coding, as you say.
Coding a little bit.
Okay, a little bit. Okay. So the question would be, how do you stay on top technically to ensure that what's going on in the company is good if you're not at the coalface anymore? What do you do to make sure that you're understanding how your engineers are engineering?
So I think like this, the two answers to that question. So like the first one, it's actually not my job anymore, and so. And it's something that I'm super uncomfortable with because it's what I love about this job is like the technical aspect of it. But the short answer is like this decision is not up to me, and so I trust the decision that other people at SoundCloud are doing. So like it's all the other tech leads and the people on my team. But for me, like it's really not enough because I want to be able to understand what's going on and to be able to contribute. And so I've done a lot of things on my own at home, outside of work hours, which is not great. But it's things like I didn't now know like how to use AWS really well or like GCP, all of these cloud providers, because at SoundCloud all of that boilerplate is done for you. Because we have a team that takes care of all of that. We have our own tools, so it just works. But for my own benefit, because my new team has to deal with this directly, I wanted to learn. So I got a couple of side projects that, of course, I never finished, but I deployed some stuff on AWS just to understand how it worked, like for my own personal benefit. And like I do this sometimes outside of work, but like not always. And we have this thing at SoundCloud where we have kind of hacker time, which I get to take sometimes. So like on Friday afternoons, I kind of, get my feet wet and deploy a few things, maybe fix a couple of bugs, that type of stuff.
So do you think the engineers who are just on the iOS teams or the teams that are doing the products you're doing with still see you as an engineer even though you're a manager as well? I mean, and is that important, do you think?
So, I mean, it's like the career, like if you look at it on paper, it's kind of like it's too fast. You know, how I was able to join, and then I became the tech lead, and then I became the director of engineering. It's just, I think like it kind of only works if you stay in the same company, because like when I stepped into the director role, like I had like interviews with the people on the new team, and a lot of them were kind of worried because like having a good manager is so important for your career, and I know that because I'm where I am now because I had really good managers. I had bad managers too at some point, and because I had good and bad managers, like I don't want to do a bad job for the people I'm going to manage because I know how important it is for their careers. And what I chose to do was like I was like really open about this and like told them, yeah, I'm going to be a manager, but I'm also going to get help because my boss has been doing this for way longer than I have and can help me do a good job. And I told them that I was going to make mistakes, and I wanted them to call me out on this. And because the culture of the company really values that type of feedback, it actually did work. And of course, because they had seen me in my role as a tech lead for a really long time before, like they were able to accept the fact that like, okay, I might actually be able to do a good job in this position.
We've just got a couple of minutes left, so we're going to ask two more questions. I know the time has gone really fast.
Yeah.
I'm going to paraphrase this one rather than read it exact. What was your worst mess up? That's not what the question says. After career switch. So, what would you say when you moved to management? What would you say was the? I mean, you've already said a little bit about at the time you went to the bosses, but once you were a manager, what's the biggest mistake you think you've made?
I mean, I have one at the top of my head now is. Like when I was managing people, like I wanted to help the people on my team grow. And I only took examples from my past career. And so I wanted them to do the things that I did, or like to succeed in their work the same way I did, instead of understanding better what motivated them and what they wanted to do, and then find a path that would kind of like help them showcase their strength, which might be very different from mine. And so, like, not identifying this at first. And that led to, like, a bunch of conflicts and people getting upset, people not getting promoted sometimes.
So it made a difference to people's lives, basically.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, when you screw up, it's you can't roll back. And so the stakes are higher.
I want to finish on a positive note. What are you most proud of in what you've done in your time?
What I'm most proud... I'm proud of what we do. Like, it's kind of cool that now I'm leading a team that handles like all media streaming at SoundCloud, and so it's hundreds of millions of plays, like petabytes of data. It's a lot of money for the company. Like like the AWS bill is pretty high, and so I'm really proud to have achieved that. And actually, I wouldn't have imagined I would be doing this when I started 7 years ago.
Cool. Well, Vincent, thank you very much. Thank you very much for some great questions out there. I found it really interesting. Hopefully you're around for the day if people want to ask you questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you have any questions, just come up to me and I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, and I hope you all enjoy your lunch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and to answer the question about when's lunch, it's now.